Hello and welcome back to CWU Live. And we have two interviews for you today covering two important sections of the union. So in the second half of the show, I have an update from Tony Bouch for Royal Mail members about the USO pilots. And for the first half of the show, we'll be talking about a group of workers in the telecoms and financial workers section of the union. Now, these are members working for Capita, who are working on a Virgin Media O2 contract providing payment management services. And they've been told that of a workforce comprising 408 employees, 127 of them are at risk of redundancy. Now, this is obviously a very worrying story. And to talk me through what's going on, I'm joined now by CWU National Officer Tracy Fussy. Thank you so much for joining me this evening, Tracy.
Hi, good evening.
I should say, as ever, the most important people in this show are you guys watching. So if you've got any questions you want me to put to Tracy, do put those in the comments. I'll be checking those throughout the show. To get us going, Tracy, could you talk me through sort of what's going on here? What news have this group of workers been given?
Okay, yeah, well, basically we were approached last week by Capita to put to us news that basically this area of work payment management, which is one of the last areas that Capita has in contract with VMO2, and they were basically stating that the staffing levels were higher than what was something that they could operate with. It was costing a lot of money. It was basically a redundancy situation, and that they needed to reduce the headcount very, very quickly. So they then detailed that they would be approaching the lowest performers in the company, those who have got performance issues over a 2-year period. And this would, of course, include people who have disabilities, health conditions, struggling for whatever variety of purposes at work. And they were going to basically approach them, offer them redundancy terms and a little bit of extra money to encourage them basically to take the offer. And naturally, our first reaction was to oppose this way forward. The company said that this is a redundancy situation, and our position has been that they should be entering into consultation with us on redundancy, not approaching the situation or the problem in the way that they are doing.
And could you talk a bit about the context of them saying these jobs need to go in the first place? Because it's a workforce of about 408 people. They're saying 127 jobs need to go. So that's more than a quarter. So that's a big move. A lot of workers they think they need to get rid of. What's your sort of interpretation of whether that sort of, I suppose, is legitimate the right word, sort of where they're coming from when they're saying that?
Yeah, well, it's a statement that they make to us. Of course, if they entered into formal consultation on redundancy, which the law does require them to do, we would have been provided with all the information to evaluate and review, and obviously, submit counter proposals if we felt that that was necessary or right. But we don't have that. All we have is a set of words given to me at a meeting, basically saying that the indications were for this area of work that the work wasn't there and this impacted staffing levels, and that they needed to reduce by X amount of positions, 127 positions, and that they would propose to exit them via settlement agreements and protected conversations with people. So they haven't dealt with this in the way that they would normally deal with legitimate redundancy situations.
And what is the law around this? Because I understand sort of what you want to happen is for them to say, okay, we think we need to make some redundancies for this reason. We'll go through, we'll talk to the union about the reasons, and you can sort of put forward alternative possible options. And then also you can negotiate a redundancy process. Instead, what they seem to be doing is sort of picking off their least favorite workers one by one and trying to bully them into taking redundancy. So those are sort of, what you'd like to see, what they're doing. Are either of these options legal, or are they sort of legally obliged to do what you're suggesting they do?
Yeah, well, our position remains that they have outlined to us that this is a redundancy situation. Given the numbers concerned, and also given that we have bargaining within this area of Capita, they should be talking to us about those redundancies, and they should also be notifying for those redundancies as well. And they've chosen not to do that. And it's complicit upon them at the first moment that they realise redundancies are likely. They should be consulting, they should be notifying staff, and they've chosen not to do that. And of course, protected conversations mean that they're telling anybody that they speak to that they can't talk to anybody else about it either. So they're denying that knowledge to other people currently that would sit in the what would be at risk pool, and this is wholly unacceptable. It's terribly bad employment practice, and we've urged Capita to come back around the table with us, to come down and sit and talk to us and find a way through this. But at the moment, the situation remains, and what is infuriating is we are getting our members now calling us, talking to our local representatives, detailing the heavy-handed approach that Capita are taking. The fact that they're telling them, well, you might as well take the money anyway, you need to sign up to go, because the likelihood is if you don't, we're going to dismiss you anyway because you are one of those low performers. Or, well, you haven't been here very long, so you're likely to be pulled into a situation where you'd be exited anyway through dismissal. And these accounts are being told to us by those members that that maybe have been struggling. We can certainly have members with disabilities who have detailed they didn't even know they were a poor performer, but there's reasons why they would be if that was the case. And this is wholly unacceptable.
And as far as I understand it, sort of some people have sort of been strong-armed into signing those documents. What is your advice to an employee of Capita who, if they are called in by the bosses and say, we strongly advise you to sign this redundancy package because if you don't sign it, we're going to fire you anyway and you'll get nothing. If that happens, what should someone do, sort of by your estimation? What would you advise people to do?
Okay, well, the members that I've spoken to today, and I know the reps have been speaking to a plethora of different members, our advice is very firm, is that you need to tell Capita that you do not want to leave, and that should be the end of the matter. For members who have perhaps indicated to Capita that they will go, they'll go, and they've now changed their mind, as we've had some people today tell us. I've spoken to Capita today and advised them of that fact. And they just need to tell Capita that they've changed their mind. I'm assured that any decisions that may have been taken will be reversed if that is the case. But our advice to members is stay firm. Speak to your local rep. Let us know. If you're feeling particularly threatened, and members are using the word bullied by managers into signing to leave, you need to contact us really quickly.
Yeah, and so what's the leverage that you guys have? Because often on this show, sort of, I'm talking about what the union wants to happen, and then what leverage the union has to make that happen. So what's sort of the CWU's strategy here in sort of the face of what does seem like pretty dreadful employment practices?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's twofold. We're really concerned about the impact on the workforce, particularly those people who have been tapped by the manager. And Capita need to really reflect upon the impact and the detriment that brings upon somebody, defining them as a poor performer when some of them don't even know that that's the case, and how that leaves them feeling that you no longer want them in your employment. It's just absolutely awful. And we're going to do everything we can to look after our members through this and through that experience. But look, the main thing is that Capita need to sit down and talk to us. They need to come and talk to us. We need to find, if this is a genuine redundancy situation that they are detailing that it is, they have a legal requirement to come and sit down and talk to us and consult. And that's what we're asking them to do. And I'm hoping that that we'll be able to make some movement on this, certainly over the coming week or two.
I'm going to put some questions to you from members in the comments. So Lawrence McIntosh says, Tracy, are these jobs likely to be offshored as other areas of this contract have already been offshored from the UK?
Yeah, look, I would absolutely understand members' concern that their work is going offshore. Capita is a global outsourcer who relies heavily on sort of an offshore reliance in places like India, South Africa. And we've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of our members' jobs that have been in the UK over the last 2 years moved offshore to such locations. And there is an absolute ripple effect every time Capita does that, whether it's at their own desire to obviously make more money, or whether they tell us it's at the bequest of VMO2 or other contracts that the client requests that. I have no indication that is what the company is seeking to do, but I think people, their concern is valid, and that's why we need to have proper conversation with the company to determine what on earth is happening here, and proper consultation, detailed conversation with their rationale.
Because again, let's actually go through the time frame. So it's, from what you said earlier, is it the case that you only found out about this last week, and they're already sort of pressuring people to sign sort of documents saying they have an intended a desire for a redundancy payment. That seems remarkably sort of rushed, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It's they consulted with us on Monday, or notified us. I'll use that terminology, and then moved quickly to talking to people, phoning those 127 up, letting them know that that they were poor performers, and offering this opportunity to leave the company. And that happened just before the Easter holidays, and I think over that Easter holiday period, it has really caused a lot of issues for people who really are questioning what on earth is going on. There's been nobody available in Capita to answer the queries because it's been the Easter break, and then we've picked up a load of queries this week since people have returned to work.
I've got a question from Phil Wright. So he says, Tracy, is there any stock to the rumour that the payment management role is being added into the customer service role that VMO2 that other outsourced providers to VMO2 do? In which case the roles would be needed onshore. Quite a specific question. I'm not sure if you can speak to that.
Yeah, I can. Look, is there any stock to the rumour? There's all sorts of rumours going around, and I think most of our Capita members would understand. The past 2 years has been pretty dynamic in terms of change proposals in lots of different contracts. Even including the Tesco mobile contract, which is detailed to go offshore. So there's lots of rumour and speculation. I don't have anything specific with payment management, though. I think the indication that there are reductions is a bit of a red flag to us, and we want to have those discussions back with Capita.
Garth Knight says, get it out into the media. So I suppose a suggestion there is it the case that sort of the union and members could increase their leverage in this situation by getting this out into the media? I mean, I suppose it's probably quite difficult unless you sort of make this into a big controversy. But what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I guess for our members sitting within Capita, and we have collective bargaining in a number of different areas, including the BBC, TV licensing. They feel a little bit hidden, I think, at times, because they work for an outsourcer and there's a big client sitting behind it that often calls the shots on what's happening. But I think in Capita, certainly in the VMO2 arena, there's been massive job losses over the past 24 months, as I've said, huge redundancies taking place, and it gets hidden in the bigger stuff sometimes, with what's happening out there. And the thing that Capita does very expertly is the offshoring, the sliding of jobs from the UK to offshore call centres. They celebrate the opening of call centres offshore when at the same time telling our members that they're losing their jobs. And all of this is it's a cauldron, isn't it? Because people are loyal, people do the work, yet this is, I think it's a sort of they're seeing work being lost, and these are the people that are now remaining. And I think the plight to get it out there is about, do the MPs understand what's happening? Lots of contracts with the government are with Capita. Does the government understand what's happening to us and many other contracts that sit out there? And I understand the plight that they want to shout out there and say, look, this is wrong, and it's wrong repetitively.
Tracy, I know you're actually currently suffering from tonsillitis, so thank you so much for speaking to us anyway. I really do appreciate it. I won't keep you much longer. Do you have any sort of final thoughts before you go that you sort of want to pass on to members, and I suppose especially affected members?
Yeah, I do. Look, we are here for you, and I think Capita particularly, we have really close representation. To be there, you will know who your reps are. Make contact with us. We are looking to hold an all members virtual online meeting next week. We want to talk to you, and we want you to have the ability to talk to us. So just look out for that invite that we're going to be sending you. And we will communicate with you as soon as we get anything back from Capita. We'll come straight back to you. And please do call us if there's any of that, really unsavoury behaviour going on regarding your managers. We want to deal with that straight away.
Tracy, Fussy, thank you so much for joining us for that important update, and I do hope you get well soon as well.
Thank you.
Let's move on now to our Royal Mail members. I have an interview with Tony Bouch. You'll know Tony well. Now, unfortunately, Tony was only available for a pre-record this week, so I won't be able to put your questions to him. Obviously, you know he is always very up for having your questions put to him. He's normally in the studio. We'll have him back in the studio for a live interview very soon as well, I'm sure. When I spoke to Tony earlier, I started by asking where we're at with the USO reform pilots.
So hi, Michael. So now we've got 6 USO sites that are live out of the 37. The 6 that are live are 4 in Northern Ireland and 2 in Northern Ireland and 4 in Scotland. We've got another office in Wales that's due to go live on Monday, a small office in Usk. So that'll be 7 out of the 37 that are live, and then the remaining 30 are due to go live from the 12th of May onwards.
What do we know about them? I mean, people were worried about the work-life balance. I suppose also the point of them, in a way, was to test whether the Royal Mail will be able to meet the new USO obligations. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so I think we put a comprehensive letter to branches out last week, the 15th. So if any of the members haven't received that yet, it's important to signpost that. So that's 7525 LTB. And that literally lists out some of the things that have gone out in the 6 that are live. So it pulls out in Newton Mearns that there's been a duty gone in. There are some issues around some of the challenges around completing some of the core walks. Same in Cumbernauld, Ayr and Girvine, where we've got some network issues and we've got to address some of that. But the key thing is what the pilot officers are showing is that nothing we didn't expect, that the core walks, when they go out are with all mail days, are a challenge. And we have to try and work through for some fatigue setup. So on Tuesday this week, we've launched a fatigue study. So there's 8 of our members in Cumbernauld that have volunteered. 12 of our members have volunteered in Cumbernauld, which is great. There's about 30% of the officers have volunteered to be part of a joint Royal Mail and CWU audit on what does the change and the way of working do to those as individuals, because obviously we want to ensure that this is fit for purpose in the longer term, and obviously if we have to tweak the design and the concept to ensure that any challenges with regards to fatigue, we've got a fix in place for that.
And from reading that document today, some of the challenges about fatigue seem to be sort of drivers versus non-drivers, and non-drivers having a particularly sort of difficult time with their new rotors. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so that is an issue, and that is definitely something we've picked up. So there's across the Royal Mail group, there's about 8,400, maybe 8,600 of our members, Royal Mail employees, that don't have a driving licence. So again, we've got to try and find a solution to that challenge. So is it because people don't have a driving licence? Is it they've never been trained to drive a Royal Mail vehicle? So we're working through that in a bit more detail to capture that data. But likewise, one of the things we're now looking at, is there a way that we can put a non-driver into a vehicle with a driver and potentially change the way in which core and combined walks work? Because one of the reasons why we've got to find a solution for it is on a Saturday, there is purely just drivers required. And ultimately, we don't want to create a two-tier workforce between drivers and non-drivers on a Saturday where it's just drivers that have got to come to work.
And also in that document, it kept referencing how workplaces were voting for 2 out of 5 Saturdays off. I suppose, what were the other alternatives? Because obviously people want as many Saturdays off as possible. So what were people voting for when they chose to have 2 out of 5 off?
Yeah, so look, in terms of, you're right, the number of people, so I think we've got a breakdown that we're due to get from the company today on the outputs of the 37. So I think out of the 37, 28 have picked their duties already, and their rotations. There's another 9 that are still to be done. We're trying to land on a revised set of words that says, because we originally designed 7 options, so that was a 2 and 6 Saturdays off, 2 and 5 Saturdays off, a 9-day fortnight, a 4-day week, a Wallington system, which is basically work however number of weeks and then get a week off. And then there were 2 adaptions for all drivers, which were 13 over 17 days and 17 over 24. Now, we've already learned from some of the pilot officers that they are, based on their own locum circumstances, that they can make the same rotations and the same design work, but with some nuances that benefit them locally. So again, we're not 100% there yet, but we're trying to land on some words with the company jointly that we can then make some adaptations to the 7 based on some of the feedback from some of the pilot officers. So again, it shows that the pilot officers are working, because when our members and Royal Mail's employees, local reps, managers have said, we can do a 2 and 5, but it's not the same as the 2 and 5 that you've published. We can change it to suit our own office. That's exactly what we want the pilots to test.
And what are you hearing in terms of people's morale sort of going into these trials? Are people feeling like they're being, asked to do something very different to what they're used to, or are sort of people kind of, I suppose, embracing the change? What can you tell me?
Yeah, so I think for lots of officers, look, change is always difficult, isn't it? But for some people, they've been delivering the same way for the last 20 years. So the change for them is significant. We're trying to manage that. I think one of the things that I think we were both Royal Mail and the CWU would jointly land on is that we've got to probably do some communications better for some of the workplaces. So again, we're not trying to point a finger, but we've got X amount of CWU reps in some of these offices. We've got X amount of managers. I think we've all seen different experiences on if a manager is producing a brief for some of the officers or communicate it. It probably lands differently to if it's someone from a CWU doing it, because I think some of our reps have got more knowledge around the subject than some of their managers. So I think we're trying to address on that and improve on that, particularly going forwards. But literally, the feedback has been positive from the officers. We're trying to learn from some of the colleagues' feedback. And one of the key parts is, and I think the document you referenced was the challenge around fatigue. And we've jointly launched a fatigue study that's, as I say, is in combo mode this week, gone live, and it'll go live in another 7 offices, because it's important that we get that. We address our members' issues, but conversely, we put the solutions in place.
Yeah, I suppose the concern for members might be that sort of, you get to the end of these trials, the CWU's position is that this is causing fatigue to certain workers on sort of certain routines, and the Royal Mail say, well, that's life, that's the new job. How confident are you that you can sort of avoid that outcome?
Yeah, I'm very confident, because there's a couple of things. So we've got some offices now that have already introduced a rotation between driving and walking. So they mix that up in the week. Obviously, we've got to factor in the non-driver issue that you referenced earlier on, and for those parts, and we're alive to that. But it may well be that a recommendation that comes out that says both parties have agreed that no one walks for more than 3 days in a week. So, for example, before the change, if I was on a 5-day walk, I might have walked 60,000 steps across the 5-day period. It may be, under the change, I might end up going from a daily average of 10 to a daily average of 15. But if I'm capped that I do no more than 3 days walking, then in a working week, I won't go more than 45,000 steps in that scenario. So actually, whilst the day you do walking is longer in terms of steps, actually over a working week, it would be less, because we would cap the number of days that people would do call delivery. Now, the challenge is, how do we deal with the non-drivers that can't do driving duties in that scenario, which we're working on. There are some ideas that both parties have got about how we can, and it's been trialled in Newton Mearns a little bit, where they've gone, someone does 50% of a core walk and then does 50% of a driving duty, and where the non-drivers can't do that, you could put 2 people together and change the percentage. So again, it's live trials as part of the pilot activity.
And I know when we have these conversations on the live show, we always get lots of questions about late starts. Is there anything sort of you can tell us about what feedback you're getting from people involved in these trial offices, sort of on sort of what time they start, what time they've been finishing, etc.?
Yeah, so I mean, pretty much all of the 6 pilots that have gone live now, people are working to their start and finish time as part of the pilots. So again, that's a positive. But one of the things we're trying to work through is, can we get some earlier starts in offices? So for argument's sake, if an office has increased its length of day because they've gone from a 7-hour 24 day now with an attendance pattern, and they've gone to a 7-hour 48 attendance pattern, then obviously their finish time is slightly later, but they've got a better attendance pattern in terms of the 2 and 5. One of the challenges is, if workload is getting to that office earlier, can we jointly try to get to an earlier start time in some of these offices? Because we want to see some of the greater benefits to our members, more than just Saturdays off. We want to see whether there's other things we can do. So we're going to try and put forward a test in Scotland on that, and we're going to try and land on that with a company in the coming weeks.
And before I let you go, you got any final message to members when it comes to these USO trials?
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot more stuff that's going to be coming out in the next week or so. So we're due to we're trying to land on a couple of documents that will put clarification out there. One of that will then go to the posted executive if we land on that early next week, and that will get released next week. And again, obviously, because now we've got 6 offices live, one of the things we're looking about is how can we actually give some live feedback from some of the members in the 37 offices, but more importantly, the 7 that are by next week, the 7 that are live. How can we get some examples from our members that we can feedback through the show? We'll get some of our reps on, some of our members on, some of the area safety reps on, but we can do that in written communications as well to follow on the back of the LTB that went out last week.
That was Tony Bouch speaking to me earlier today. I can see lots of your comments coming in about sort of how many steps a day you walk, other concerns about the USO. I'm not going to read them out because I'm not going to be able to answer them. But what I will do is next time I've got Tony on, I will put these questions to him and he will be able to sort of give a more informative response than I would be able to. Let's wrap up then for now this week. Thank you to Tony Bouch. Thank you, of course, to Tracy Fussy for joining me in the first half of the show. Solidarity especially to those workers at Capita who seem to be being treated appallingly. As Tracy said, if you feel like you're being pressured to potentially agree to something you're not sure if you want to agree to, then do immediately, in fact, get in touch with the CWU, with your reps. For now, thank you so much for watching. We'll be back at the same time next week. And until then, stick with your union.